Welcome to Taught, the podcast. Before diving into today's episode, I have an important reminder/disclaimer to share. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Content provided on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. We encourage you to do your own research and consult with qualified professionals before making any decisions based on the information discussed in this or any other episode. Additionally, any opinions or statements made during the podcast are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show.
When I get called in to work with a teacher, it is often because things have been going poorly for quite some time and they're out of ideas. So they finally call us. And I walk into a lot of spaces where things are challenging. I have experienced more in the last 2.5, 3 years. Teachers I work with are walking right out of the profession, right? Like I'll coach them, which should be supportive. It's actually proven to be the most effective support for teachers to change their practices. And instead of that being the case, they're like, nope, this is too little too late and I'm done and I'm leaving. And they're either leaving the school they're in, the district they're in, or the profession altogether.
A few years ago, I started writing a fictitious story based on my time as an educator. It is called Taught, and the story was partially inspired out of anger and frustration fueled by burnout. Okay, actually it was more than partially inspired by anger and frustration. But Taught has also become a vehicle for me to tell what I thought at the time, and in some ways continue to think, was and is the real story of teaching. I now realize that my perspective is not everyone's perspective, but there are some pieces of Taught that resonated with many educators. This podcast is an extension of that story, and I, a former teacher, will interview other educators asking them to share how they really feel about the current state of education. Why are so many teachers burn out? Why are so many, like me, leaving the field? We likely won't solve any problems or come up with any solutions, but we can create a community of voices that maybe begin the conversation around how educators can take back teaching. I'm Melissa LaFleur. Welcome to Taught, the podcast. Today I have Tracy with me. Tracy is a social emotional learning specialist right now, but when she and I met, she was a first grade teacher. Tracy's classroom quickly drew the attention of many people in our school and our school district because she was merging her special education background with her training on social emotional development, thus creating a very unique first grade community. The students started the year with language to discuss their feelings and strategies to cope with the big feelings that first graders can have. The results were amazing. These 6-year-olds became a kind and compassionate community of learners who treated each other with respect. It seemed as if Tracy had found the magic elixir that we were all looking for. And, as happened so many times, she was pulled out of her classroom and into a different area of education, an area where the hope was that she could create the same dynamic she had in her classroom. This was the world of intense behavior support. She was transported from a classroom where she could define success and create the environment she knew would support all students into a shared space. In this shared space, she was given one corner and expected to recreate her success with students from multiple grade levels in different classes and all with differing abilities to regulate their emotions and behavior. This is the world of most behavior specialists today, and it's a world where the burnout rate is pretty high. Today, we're going to hear Tracy's thoughts on burnout, as well as her current role in education. Tracy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here and talk about all things education.
So tell us a little bit about kind of your story. What brought you to education?
What brought me to education was a really, really long and twisting path. I remember being in high school and just outside of high school in college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And all the advice I got from people who knew me closely, everyone said, you should be a teacher. You would be so good at being a teacher. And I firmly rejected that idea because I had not had a really good experience in the education system. I actually went to private school, Catholic school, and it was not a good fit for me. I asked repeatedly to not go to the school system that I went to, and that was rejected. And it was just really hard. And I kept hearing, you should be a teacher. And I was like, I will not be going back into this system for the rest of my life that was not supportive of me when I was in it. So I actually ended up working in residential for children and young adults who had developmental and intellectual disabilities. And that's really challenging work. We did a lot of really intense behavior support. I actually ended up back in schools supporting as essentially a surrogate parent or fill-in parent. Many of the kids that we had lived far away from where they were living with us, or their families did. So I went in as the family representative in IEP meetings, so individualized education plans for these kids, and started seeing kind of how messy special ed was for kids who were in it, when me as like a 22-year-old was the one advocating for them, and I had no business doing that. So I did that for a while. And from there, I actually moved into working as a behavior specialist for an agency. So I worked across 10 different school districts, again, working with the same population of individual students, but then we were assigned one-on-one to work with students who basically school districts didn't know what to do with anymore. So they hired outside agencies to come in and work with these kids. And that was also a really high burnout job. And so I actually shifted to work into one classroom, again, kids with really, really big needs. And it was there that I had a really great mentor. And at this point, I was in my, I was older, we'll just say older, and decided that instead of being a support staff in a school, that I should be a teacher. So I went back to school and became a teacher, and thought, because I had spent all of this time working with kids who needed more and were in the special education system, that I was going to be a special education teacher. And my degree that I got in education set me up to be either an elementary school teacher or any age special ed teacher. And I tried to skip being an elementary school teacher because I didn't think I wanted to do it. I asked for a waiver. I said, can I please just skip this part and go right into special ed because this is what I'm going to do? And they said, no.
Yeah.
And so I landed in a first grade classroom to student teach, and decided once I was there and really doing it that I loved it. And I ended up teaching first grade for a few years. And I really did. As you mentioned in the intro, I loved teaching first grade. I loved making that community. I absolutely ruffled some feathers, I think, when I wanted to do things the way I did. I remember being asked how I could afford to spend 3 minutes after recess doing a mindfulness activity with kids. How could we afford that time?
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't know how not to, right? Like, have you seen them come in?
Yeah.
They're wild, because they should be, right? Like, they were just outside spending all this energy. And so I found ways to do it differently and make it, in all honesty, I needed it to be an environment where I could be okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And it was definitely different than how a lot of people did it.
Many of those strategies work for all of us, not
Yes.
just for kids.
It's interesting because now that's what I do is try to onboard adults into thinking about what do you need? And if that's what you need, how do you make that accessible for the kids that you work with?
I just interviewed a guy who's doing some different kind of work, but he was in the classroom and he actually was from the UK. And he said that he realized as he was doing the activities that were meant to kind of help kids look at things differently for their own education, that a lot of it was mindfulness and a lot of it was strategies around taking care of themselves and just looking at things in a different way. And he said what he realized is that the teachers of those kids were being affected by it as well. And so he started advertising his program and things to, hey, teachers, you could do this to help your kids. And what really happened is the teachers came in and got the resources for themselves first, and then were
Mhm.
able to take their kids in that path. That sounds very similar to the work you're doing.
It really is. I keep thinking about it. I actually often tell people when they're like, "Oh, you're a teacher. What do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I work with adults, so it's not quite the same." And it's often hard because you lose a lot of the joy that comes from teaching, right? Like when you're with kids, they are funny and they are learning and growing, and you get to see that happen, and it makes it really rewarding. And when you work with adults in a K-12 system, they are frustrated and overwhelmed and moving towards burnout, and things are really hard, and it's hard to see the growth, and it's hard to see that what you're doing makes a difference. um, but the hope is that you start to shift adult
Yeah.
practice, right? Like that's all I want to do is start to shift adult practice. I'm not here to change or fix kids. I'm here to think about what do we do to make this a sustainable place for adults to be so that kids can be supported.
Yeah, because if we are broken adults, we can't be showing up for kids. I don't know if you remember when we worked together, I went and did this whole big workshop from some people who had started this work with Carol Dweck on mindset stuff at Stanford, and then
Mhm.
they brought their program to UW, and they put on this thing that we all got to go to for free. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. But one of the big things from their research was how educators need feedback, but they need feedback from people who are doing it right. And
Yes.
I think that that's such a piece that we're missing right now in education. There were definitely things that I could give feedback on, but I was not doing them right. There was something that I was doing right that I could have given feedback on. But one of the things that when I brought all this information back to the building, because that was in education land, if you go to the workshop, you got to bring the stuff back for everybody.
Mhm.
It was in no way should I have been teaching any of that. But one of the things that they wanted us to do is to go observe, just observe each other in the building, teachers, especially if we knew somebody was, I don't know, whatever your thing is, right? Social
Mhm.
emotional learning. If you have a great practice for getting kids to calm down after recess, then have other teachers go in and observe that. Um, so I went back and I was really excited about it, and nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted anyone to come into their room and see them. And I
Mhm.
think that we are such a broken people, teachers. We just live in this fear of being evaluated harshly and criticized, that sometimes we forget what our own gifts are. And we forget uh, that we do have contributions to make. And boy, that is just such a not great mindset for us to be in when we're dealing with little people. We want to be bringing them joy and them to feel confident in us. We should feel confident in ourselves.
Right. I think it's so hard to teach that to kids when we can't model that in our own practice. Right. You children should be open to getting feedback from me, hearing about all the ways that you need to learn and grow. And I'm going to close my door and put my head down and want no one to see what I'm doing or give me feedback so that I can learn and grow.
I think that makes your position in your district an amazing one. That clearly the staff, well, I'm not going to assume here, but the district believes that people can overcome that hurdle of having an adult come in and maybe show them some ways to look at things differently.
I appreciate your optimistic view. I think that I am really, really grateful that my position exists because my position does not exist in most districts. We do have a social emotional learning department, but our department is made up of 3 people for 35 schools, like 17,000 students. So to think that the 3 of us are making a huge impact is really optimistic. I think about the fact that our elementary success team, right? They are only supporting elementary schools, which is like 22 schools, right? So it's still a lot. Maybe I'm overestimating there, but they have 9, 10, 11 people on their team, right? So, and their focus is language arts and math. So super important. And that's where our priority is, right? Like that is absolutely where we're putting our investment in people is in academics, and we're sort of an afterthought, and we don't often get included in things, and we don't always have a seat at the table, and we exist, right? So it's both.
And we know this is not new research that kids who are not doing well emotionally aren't going to do well in language arts and math.
They're
So,
just not. And that's the thing. I'm like, we are the foundation, and I don't need us to always be a bigger team. I don't always think more people is the answer. I do think strong collaboration and integration would make a huge difference. And that's the piece that seems to be missing for me.
collaboration in general. I don't know why that is such a hard thing for us to get down. I suspect that again, something being implemented poorly so many times in a row has left a bad taste in our mouths.
Uh-huh.
So that's my suspicion. I have a lot of opinions on this podcast with no evidence to support them, except for my 15 years in education and my assumptions.
But I mean, I think we can say that about many things that we do in education. Like, how many times have we gotten reading instruction wrong? But we still keep trying.
I'm not 100% sure we got it wrong. I think we just kept changing it enough times that none of us knew what we were doing. And we're like,
Right.
here's a book I'm supposed to let you read every day. I'm not sure what I'm doing because I just got this memo this morning in my email that said if I'm not having kids read 15 minutes a day, I'm going to be in trouble.
Right. And that's the thing though, right? Like if you actually look at many of the academic results that we're getting, they're, fair-ish.
And
If
they're
you're
not
ranking
changing.
them on they're not, right? But we keep changing and our results don't change. Yet we're willing to keep trying and doing it. And the thing that we don't invest in, we actually have a ton of research to say, like, this actually works. When we do this and we do this well, kids are going to learn. Kids want to, I mean, who doesn't? And I don't just mean kids. I mean, as an adult, who wants to show up every single day and not feel welcome and not feel valued and only be told the things that you're doing wrong?
Yeah.
I don't want that.
I think one of the things that I noticed post pandemic, and I only taught 1 year in a classroom. I
Mhm.
taught 1 year online. But that year that I taught post pandemic is that most of the students, not just in my class, but in general, did not feel like that was their space, which was a really weird dynamic. And it wasn't that I don't know if they felt welcomed or not. I don't want to words in their mouth, but it was more of a, this is not my space. I should not be here. I don't want to be here. I'm not comfortable here. I want to be doing these other things. And I wonder how much of that was influenced by being at home in their space, combining that with learning. And then all of a sudden, now you have to go back to the original learning space. And it's like, you know,
I just think we had an opportunity to think about restructuring how that works or giving more voice to students to say, how does this work for you? And we instead focused on, I mean, at least where I'm situated, we focused on acceleration. We're like, welcome back, get to learning because you missed so much while you were doing this in a different space. So, not going to think about how to welcome you back, not going to think about what you need now that you're here and it's different than where you've been and you've
that's a really
seen
good
another
point.
way.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do a lot of teaching around right now for adults is that the other thing that happened when we brought kids back, and again, at least where I am, the focus was on how to have strong safety protocols. And I often think in tiers of support, right? So our tier one is what's happening for everybody all the time. And previous to COVID, we would think about what are our school-wide expectations? How do kids know they're being successful? How do we make sure that everyone is letting kids know that this is what is needed and what's working? And when we came back from COVID, we're like, actually, the thing you need to think about right now is how to keep kids spaced 3 feet apart, how to make sure people wear masks, how to make sure you are having hand sanitizer and hand washing. That was our tier one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when that happened, we lost so much of how to create a welcoming space in favor of how to create a safe, and I say that in quotes, right? Like safe learning space. And it's different. And I don't know, again, where I sit and I work across our whole K-12 system. I don't see that many people, and I wouldn't say everybody, some people have gone back and things are really good, but as a system, we have not figured out yet how to create those really welcoming learning environments. And I think teachers set aside a lot of that and haven't picked it all back up yet.
Yeah, well, I talked about this in previous podcasts, but not with you personally. You know, when we went back, because I taught the year that everybody went back, like not
Mhm.
half a year, but we all went back, everybody
Yep.
for the full year. And in the classroom, that was my last year teaching. And we were told you do need to do these things. The
Yep.
research shows this.
Yep.
But within a week, it was, oh, and you're going to do the state assessment an extra time. So start getting the
Mhm.
kids ready for it. Oh, and we need to know where they're at mathematically. So we
Yep.
want you to do this little math test. It's just a little short test and send it in just so we have the data. Oh, and we want you to do reading inventories with all the kids this week. Just make sure. And ended up taking all of this time that we had been given for this data collection. And I think that on top of that, as a teacher, I felt a huge amount of stress for if one of my kids got sick and I had not followed the protocol. We were
Yep.
not eating lunch all together in the lunchroom, and they had to go through a
Mhm.
certain process to get their lunches and come back. And then the custodian had to come in and clean their room. And the kids are trying to share food. And I just felt like there are so many moving parts. I can't keep the kids to keep their masks on. I can't
Mhm.
remind them to hand sanitize multiple times a day. We're in Portugal right now. I'm like, Camille, do you wash your hands before you have lunch? She's like, what are you talking about? Like, you do not wash your hands before lunch. I put hand sanitizer in her thing because she was getting sick here all the time post pandemic. But I
Mhm.
mean, they don't even have soap in her bathroom, in the girls' bathroom. She said the boys have it. And I thought, well, the boys probably need it more. But this is just so not a thing here in Portugal, at least in her school. But I mean, we were supposed to have just hand sanitizer alone. Kids were supposed to hand sanitize every time they left the room and entered the room.
Mhm. Mhm. Right. So how did we expect teachers to do anything else? Like, it's not surprising to me that we haven't created spaces where students and teachers are feeling like this is a place I want to be and this is a place I can be successful.
And how do you feel welcomed into a classroom if you feel like you're a germ, you know, spreader?
Well, I think that is to normalize some of that and be like, this is just a safety thing, right? Like
Yeah,
we can do that, but it
you're
really
right.
matters how we do that. And nobody told us how. Nobody told us how when we came back. I remember again, like I do a lot around adult learning in my current role and talking to adults, like who told you? Like we made a list. I actually pulled it off the internet, but it was like a list of the 57 things, like you were mentioning, all of the assessments that needed to happen, all of the safety protocols that needed to be put in place. Like we came back to a version of education that nobody had ever done before and nobody knew how to do it. So there wasn't a guide. Like, here's how you create a pandemic safe classroom where students
Yeah.
also feel safe and welcome.
Yeah.
Go. Right. Everybody was making it up as they went, and there were a lot of variation in how that got implemented.
Absolutely. And you did mention the B word, which is burnout.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned it earlier, and
Uh-huh.
you've mentioned that you're working with teachers. What are you, I mean, is it getting better?
No, I feel like, I mean, honestly, let me qualify what I have to say. What I have to say is that typically when I get called in to work with a teacher, it's probably too late, right? Um, when I get called in to work with a teacher, it is often because things have been going poorly for quite some time and they're out of ideas. So they finally call us. And I walk into a lot of spaces where things are challenging. I have experienced more in the last 2.5, 3 years. Teachers I work with are walking right out of the profession, right? Like I'll coach them, which should be supportive. It's actually proven to be the most effective support for teachers to change their practices. And instead of that being the case, they're like, nope, this is too little, too late, and I'm done, and I'm leaving. And they're either leaving the school they're in, the district they're in, or the profession altogether. Um, I I have a little bit of hope this year. I'm currently coaching a few teachers, and one is brand new, ready to stay and keep trying. One is 10 years in, gonna change schools because we think if we change schools, it'll get better. And like,
You're
it'll just get
right.
different. It'll just get different. But if different is what you need and it helps you stay, I think that's great. Because we are in such a teacher shortage also that I'm doing everything in my power to keep educators
Yeah.
because I feel it. I do a lot of work with adults, and then I also get to sub because we have a teacher shortage. So the adults in our system who are in place to support the adults in our system are pulled from our work to sub because we just don't have enough people to do it. So
Yeah.
I do spend time in classrooms and with students, and it's a lot. And even with all of our additional adults supporting our system, we are nowhere near where we need to be. And every single day across our system, we have classrooms that don't have teachers, which
Yep.
adds to it, right? Because then the teachers who are in the building, as you know, get pulled to cover all of those classrooms. So then the little bit of planning and prep time you have, or the minute you have to breathe, you're now working with somebody else's class.
Yeah. Or you've got two classes yourself all of a sudden
Yep.
because you know those kids. It's your partner, your teaching partner's kids, and
Yep.
you had a science lab. So you just bring them all in, and a couple of paras show up, and we make it work.
A couple pairs if you're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, right? Like our paraeducators, our support staff are also feeling it. I did a series of trainings with a school this year with their paraeducators, and over half of them that I worked with over multiple sessions told me we're leaving.
Yeah.
We're done. This is the hardest work. We don't know what we're doing. There isn't a clear plan in place. And we're not going to stick around to see what doesn't change next year.
And additionally, they oftentimes are treated with a level of disrespect that is just ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely.
I
Uh,
actually have a para this week that I am going to interview who heard, I don't know if you heard Debbie's podcast, but Debbie is a para and she did a podcast. It was this week's. And after he heard hers, he contacted me and said, I have some things I want to add. So,
yeah. I my first official job in K-12 education, like working for a public school system, was as a paraeducator.
me too.
And I, I look back on that and I look around still and I'm thinking, how do we have these incredible people who want to do this job
That's right.
and we are not training them and we are not paying them adequately and we are not supporting them and we are having them work with our most vulnerable student populations.
Yep. And
I think our system.
criticizing how they do it.
Yep.
Yep. I agree. Yeah. So burnout is getting worse. That's what I just heard. um, I would hope that doing things like what you're doing would be helpful to that. Um, I think attending to those needs for those educators has to be huge. But as you just stated, for a lot of the ones that you are interacting with, it's a little too little, a little too late. And of course, this rings home for me because I quit. And I go back and forth with this. I have a lot of guilt about it. Do I think I was the world's greatest teacher? Absolutely not. Do I think I was a good teacher? Yes. Do we need good teachers? Yes. We
Yeah.
need people who can manage a classroom, who
Mm-hmm.
understand how to look at a curriculum and teach it. I'm not saying we need warm bodies, but we need experienced people to stay in the field, and we need them to mentor the people who are coming into the field. And we need to create these communities where we're all working together. And to know that I just kind of said, nope, I'm out. At the same time, I needed to do that for my own well being.
I think you really hit on it there, right? We can only do as much as we can do. And if we are in the field and burnt out, it's possible we're causing more harm than good,
Yeah, I
right?
agree. Yep.
Um, I think about educators who are new or who are needing to develop some skill. And the thing that I hear a lot of adults say, and I think this is out of frustration, but they're like, well, if they don't want to do this or if they can't figure out how to do this, like maybe this isn't the job for them. Like, or what if we said, oh, if this is feeling challenging for them or they're feeling frustrated, what supports can we put in place to help them?
Yeah. How do we come at it from the top rather than just telling them to go and we'll replace you? That idea of you're replaceable
Mm-hmm.
is a really icky one.
Well, and also so short-sighted. Like we're already feeling the pinch from being in a teacher shortage. So why, if people want to do this work, would we not support them to develop and grow their skill? There aren't new teachers coming at the rate that they need to be coming for us to have that attitude.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that there's a lot of work to be done around respect for one another within the community,
Oh,
um, from
absolutely.
top to bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and setting up some practices around that where this kind of thing isn't tolerated and this kind of thing is expected. Like what I mentioned earlier, you will have your colleagues in here. They
Mm-hmm.
are here to help you. You are here to help them because we are all working as a community. It's not a competition. You're not competing with the other third grade teacher. You are actually all doing the same thing. You can do it your way, they can do it theirs, but we all have stuff to learn from each other and we all have stuff to teach.
I dream of working in a system like that someday.
Let's create it, Tracy. You and
I'm
me.
trying. I'm trying.
I know you are. I know that behind the scenes work is really important. I wonder if you don't get a lot of pushback, because I have been a part of conversations where we talk about those people with the district level jobs. They don't know. They have no idea what we're going through. And you know what? Would have more money if we had fewer district level jobs.
Interestingly, I sit in that weird in between space, right? Because I'm still on a teacher contract. At any point, I could be reassigned to a classroom, and I don't have a hard time with that thought, right? So when I think about district people, I know that many people put me in that category, and to some degree I am, but I often say I have positionality without power, right? Like I sit at a lot of tables in meetings where I get to like share some things, but when at the end of the day, when decisions are made, I'm not the decision maker. I'm not the one deciding how money is spent. And like I said, we have a team of 3 in my department, which I don't think is taking a whole lot of district resources away. I hope that we're a value add instead of a depletion, right? And especially for my positionality, I see so many unnecessary positions and just organizational things that are questionable at best. Like what, why do we need all of these people in all of these positions that are much higher than me and make way more money than me, who don't see the inside of classrooms yet make all the decisions that impact everything that's happening?
Yeah. That's a huge one.
But you're right. I am often perceived as that other when I have to do a lot of convincing to people. Like I'm on the same contract as you. I'm in the same union as you. I am only here. I often, when I coach, I say I'm peer-to-peer support, right? This is non-evaluative. I don't report to your evaluator. I don't even share with them anything you don't want me to share. So hopefully this can be a safe space for you to learn and grow, or tell me to leave, because that's actually your right.
I think that's one of the toughest positions to be in, is when you are in a position where you have to justify why you're in that position to the person that is relying on you to do whatever the prescribed duty is. I think of many committees that you and I both have worked on,
Mm-hmm.
and you're tasked. And this sounds very similar to what you're going through right now, except you get to do it every day. But you're tasked with this. Here's this big thing. Everybody or this group needs to be on board with this. And you go in and your peers, like you said, and you're faced with having to reconnect on that level, at the same time pushing us all where we need to be.
Yes. Uh-huh. Because nobody wants to be told what to do.
No, me either.
And uh, I think that actually gets to, I think one of the struggles that I see consistently, and I know I've shared this with you before, but I think that because we are so open to everybody just doing what they want to do and nobody wanting any feedback, we get in this place where there's no sustainable systems.
Tracy had much more to say. Please tune in next week for the second part of her interview.
I wish I knew.
Today's episode was produced and edited by me. The theme music is by Otis McDonald featuring Joni Inez.
But I'm so frustrated.
If you know someone who might enjoy these conversations, please share the podcast episodes as much and as often as you can. It's as simple as copying the link you use to access today's episode and sending it in a message or sharing it on social media. I'm a small independent operation, and your shares broaden our audience. Perhaps you or someone you know will be inspired to talk about teacher burnout. If you would like to get your voice on my podcast, contact me via the link on my webpage, taught.buzzsprout.com. Coach, speaker, and author Rashid Ogunlaro said, "It may take many voices for people to hear the same message." Join me in being one of the many voices rising up to get the message out around educator burnout. This is Melissa LaFleur. Thank you for listening to Taught, the podcast.
I wish I knew.